Hey, howdy, hey.
Hey,
Good to meet you, Chris.
yeah, you too. Thanks for willing to do this.
Hmm. Absolutely, I'm excited.
So I could just jump around before getting to Honkai.
Yeah, absolutely, we can. I'm easy.
Well, the first thing I can ask is, do you have a special story of how you got into SAG?
Oh, funny enough, actually, I'm not a part of the union yet. I'm SAG eligible, but and that's a long and arduous process that any actor can kind of tell you. Like trying to get your SAG card is like one of the going to be the most difficult thing you'll probably acquire in your career. So when I first started acting, I kind of wanted to do really anything and everything, but I recognized that the bigger jobs were in the union. So when I started out, I was doing the grunt work of doing background work, and that's a huge nightmare in and of itself. And there they don't even just they don't treat you like people. They just kind of treat you like cattle. Go over here, do this, especially if you're in large groups. If it's a huge cattle call kind of a thing, no pun intended there. But I think after I had done enough jobs where they ended up getting a union voucher, I had you have to have three in order to be able to be eligible to be into the union, and I got my three. But also, what I didn't have at the time was the money because it's like about 3 grand to drop and then some, in order to get your SAG card. And at the time, I was just like, no, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna drop three grand for a SAG card. No, thank you. So I just continued to kind of like just trudge along. But after a while, I kind of found my niche as an indie voice actor, like just doing that essentially and acquiring jobs and other opportunities and stuff like that. But to answer your question, to get back to it, I'm actually not a part of the unions. I'm still, non-union. But Dr. Ratio was kind of like a um a serendipitous, act of God, essentially. How that happened.
So was it just acting in general that you wanted to pursue, or
At in
like,
the beginning, yes. When I was in community college, this is right after I had gotten out of high school. I thought I wanted to be an animator because I grew up with cartoons and video games and Disney and anime, and that's what I thought what I wanted to do. But I did love acting. But after I kind of job shadowed a animator who was attending Cal Arts at the time, I just got a chance to check out her workload like on just a day-to-day basis because it takes me hours just to do one picture. And then I realized like because she's doing like immediate like sketches within seconds. And I'm like, it takes me hours to do that. How do you do that in just a matter of minutes? And then she's like, yeah, I have anywhere between 150 to 400 sketches, like depending on what assignment. I'm like, are you joking? And so I immediately found out right away that I did not want to be an animator. So I went back to acting. And this is when I think voice acting was starting to become more and more prevalent in the culture, where they were releasing behind the scenes footage of 90s cartoons and 80s cartoons of very famous and prevalent voice actors. Um, I forget his name, but he's Pinky from Pinky and the Brain. Maurice LaMarche voiced Brain from Pinky and the Brain, but then his co-actor, his co-star, I think his name's Rob Paulson. I could be
yeah,
wrong about that. Yeah,
yep.
hooray! I got that right. Rob Paulson had a podcast, and so he started inviting very famous and very well pronounced voice actors onto his podcast, and that was when I think it was starting to get a little more um, attention in the mainstream, and also even just within the entertainment industry in general. So I think the secret was out at that point because at the time, voice acting was more of a vocation where it was where television actors went to die essentially, like where or radio hosts went to kind of like have a different vein of work because a lot of those early voice actors, they're titans now, like they're kind of the godfathers of the voiceover industry. That's how they got their start, where because they started in radio, and then they found cartoons, video games, and what have you. And so I quickly found out about that because I grew up with the culture and I absolutely loved cartoons, and so I was trying to do theater and voice acting at the same time and trying to figure out that whole line of work. And it was complicated. Like you had to really do your homework and your research. And Um, and I tried, figuring it out, and it wasn't, consistent in that sense. You really have to hustle if you're, especially if you're being your own boss. You really have to, kind of just do the grunt work and apply to anything and everything you can get your hands on. And at the time, I was still kind of dealing with a lot of insecurities. And so, and also I took rejection very personally. Like, and in the industry, you can't have that kind of attitude because you eat rejection for breakfast, essentially. So, I kind of had to go through the ringer in order to really find my step, in order and find out who I was. And I ended up having to go through that the whole trial for years. And in that span, I kind of had some success here and there. Like I've done video games, I've done, some short animated in indie cartoons and stuff like that, but nothing really prevalent in the mainstream or anything like really overtly commercialized. So Dr. Ratio, to kind of get things back to the original talking point, Dr. Ratio is kind of my breakout role and just on that standpoint. And not to say like I haven't had any other success. I have. Hopefully we can kind of get around to it, but that's essentially the journey that I ended up finding myself in taking. And of course, I can elaborate that further the more we get into it.
Was Honkai kind of just a general audition, or was that special too?
That was very special, actually. So I'll try and make a long story short, but I end up making long stories longer. So please bear with me in that mind. Um, so at the beginning of 2023, and this was just last year, I was working as a machinist in a warehouse in the local area that I had lived with my family. And I had, because we had just moved into that town at the beginning of 2021, and I needed a job fast. And during that time, voice acting was not paying the bills for me. So I had to get a job immediately. And so, sure enough, I went to a job fair for this aerospace and military warehouse that produces micro parts. And they were like, yeah, you have any background and or any experience in doing machine work? I'm like, no, not so ever. You're hired. I'm like, what? Okay. Easiest job interview I've ever had in my life. So I worked that job for 2 years, making micro parts for aerospace and military projects. And that was a job where I feel like I grew the most. But at the same time, I knew without a shred of doubt in the core of my spirit that this was not what I was supposed to be doing. And so at the beginning of 2023, I just felt just this restlessness. I knew that like I should be doing other things. And so I had some one-on-one time with God, and I was praying, and I was like, God, I know I could be successful at this. I just don't know what the heck I'm doing. If you see a future with me in this industry, I know through you all things are possible. Um, if you could bless me in that, like it would mean the world to me. But if not, I'll put this away forever. I'll never speak of it again. I'm more than happy and content just being responsible and providing for myself and eventually a family, because that was on my heart as well. And so, anyways, I pray that prayer, and a couple of weeks go by. Randomly, I get an email from this gentleman named Philip Bach, and I don't know how many other cast members from Honkai Star Rail you've interviewed, but this name might strike some familiarity. So Philip Bach reaches out to me, a gentleman I've never heard of before. He starts off with, "Hey, here's my number. Call me." And I'm like, "Okay," but he follows up with, he says, "Please look me up on IMDb. I hopefully my credits will speak for themselves." Sure enough, I Google him. I find him on IMDb. Like credit after credit after credit. He's done animated feature films, TV shows, streaming services, AAA video games, like you name it. He's done it from a voice directing standpoint. And so I'm like immediately, oh my gosh, this is somebody. This is somebody reaching out to a nobody like me. And so immediately I'm grabbing the phone, going like, "Hey Philip, how's it going? Yeah, very nice to meet you." Like just trying to play it cool, but inside I'm going like, oh my gosh, kind of a thing. This has never happened before. So he starts telling me about this project that he's working on, because after we exchange pleasantries, he's like, "Are you represented? Are you part of the union?" I'm like, "No, I'm not part of the union. I'm not represented." He's like, "I have no idea how the hell you're not represented, because I think you're a standout talent." So at the time, they were working on a game called Smite, a MOBA game, and like very similar to League of Legends and Dota. The only difference was, I think, besides a couple of mechanics, it's third person instead of, like, the overhead, perspective in that vein. And so they were doing a deal with Nickelodeon. Some of their hallmark characters, were they get alternate skins. And the cool thing about what Smite does is that for every hallmark character that they have, every alternate skin that comes available, it's voiced by a different actor. And so and that's really cool in regards, like, to other actors coming in and getting a chance to shine and getting a paycheck out of it, which is really nice. So they were getting the license to the likeness of all these hallmark characters for Nickelodeon. So Danny Phantom was one, Fairly Odd Parents, and then Invader Zim. Now, the reason why that's important is because earlier on in my career, when I was still kind of figuring out who I was, I got my start doing celebrity and cartoon impressions, and along with a lot of other prevalent, more successful YouTubers, Brizzy Voices, Brock Baker, just to name a few. And so I used to do these impressions, for friends and family members, when I was younger, and they're like, "You should put your impressions on YouTube." And so I'm like, "Oh, please, like, get out of here," because I knew that those titans had already existed when in the beginnings of YouTube. And so after the upteenth person told me to put my impressions on YouTube, I was like, "Okay, fine, whatever." I did. And along with all the characters in my arsenal, Invader Zim kind of kept coming up the most. So I was kind of, for a while there, that random guy that can somewhat do a Richard Horvitz Invader Zim impression. And so fast forward back to Philip and his situation. The normal pool of talent that they were trying to pull from to voice Invader Zim wasn't fitting the bill and wasn't cutting it. And so he took matters into his own hands. And so he went to YouTube and started looking up, Invader Zim impressionists. And he found my videos. And now at this time, I had kind of let my YouTube channel die in the background. And I hadn't really put anything up on there in years. And so he reaches out to me. Like, the odds of him, like, finding my videos, like, for this project are, like, astronomical. So it really was like a prayer answered in that sense. And so he says, "I want you to audition for this character, and then, like, but then we'll keep talking." So sure enough, I audition for Invader Zim. He thinks it's amazing. Sadly, long story short, I don't get Invader Zim. But he's just like, "Oh, Jordan, you have no idea. Like, I was so frustrated. Like, I fought for you. I wanted you to get this job. But sadly, they went with someone else. I know him personally. I'm happy for him, but I think they're stupid for, doing this. I think there was no comparison. But good news is we know each other now. I'm going to start sending you auditions. And so please, keep auditioning." And so um, he starts sending me these auditions, and more jobs for Smite open up. I do book a gig with him for an alternative skin for one of their characters, Ho Yi. It's for their winter package. It was a Winter's Mark Ho Yi. And that was really cool. That was like my first time in a legitimate, like, North Hollywood recording studio, and my first interaction with Philip, which was, very insightful and very experience gaining, for lack of a better term. So some time goes by. Smite kind of has its time in the sun, and then a new project comes up. And so I'm reading the description of this new project, and it's called Honkai Star Rail. And at the time, like, it's called something different for the sake of, anonymity, because a lot of projects that are heavily under wraps in the industry, they go by different titles. It's the same for movies and TV and what have you. So I started reading about this project, and I'm like, okay, it's kind of like an anime, esque, game in that sense. And so I was a fan of the genre, and so I was, like, immediately hooked and invested into it. And at the time, I didn't know if it was Genshin Impact or not, because I kept seeing a lot of ads for Genshin Impact on YouTube. A lot of subscribers that I'm subscribed to, they would always do a sponsor, like, this video is sponsored by Genshin Impact, and so I I thought that's what it was. Turns out, it wasn't. So, and at the time, I didn't bother to do any research. Turns out it was the same company. But moving forward, the first batch of characters come around. I audition for them. Nothing happens. Then the next batch of characters come out, and I see this description for this character called Doctor Ratio. And so I'm reading his bio, and this is supposed to be a man that's immeasurably intelligent, very condescending, very arrogant, very prideful, and he has like 3 PhDs, and I'm like, wow, like, and so I'm already kind of like putting together an image in my head of what I want this character to sound like. And so Sherlock from Benedict Cumberbatch specifically from Sherlock kind of pops into my head. And so I kind of start playing around with that a little bit, and also just I throw in just a pinch of Tom Hiddleston's Loki from the Marvel franchise. So I kind of make him kind of British, but not really, in that sense, but like kind of like that British pompousness with as an intellectual or a philosopher. And I think one of the audition lines is actually one of his lines that you can select when you first get him, because whenever you get a new character in Honkai Star Rail, along with their stats, you have their voice lines from their library that you can select. And one of his lines is something along the lines of, "You look distressed. Is something troubling you? If so, you can figure it out for yourself." So very like I don't got time for you, pal. Like, you're not on my level. And so I auditioned for Dr. Ratio. And so a couple weeks go by, and then I get another email from out of nowhere. And this is from our scheduler. And they start off with, "Hey, the client wants to know how you want to be credited." And so I'm thinking, if you could credit me as Jordan Paul Haro, I would greatly appreciate that. There's actually other Jordan Haros out there. Follow-up question: did I book something? And they're like, "Yes, back in May, you auditioned for this character, Dr. Ratio, for Honkai Star Rail. The client wants to sign you." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh." And so Philip calls me up immediately. He's like, "Dude, congratulations. I don't think you understand how big this character is, though." And so I'm like, "Enlighten me." And so he's like, "Not only is this character going to be immeasurably popular, but this is a foot in the door for agencies. This character is going to be very well received, and I won't be surprised by if you get invited to Comic-Con and Anime Expo solely for this character." So the picture that he's painting with his words, like, are all the things that I've hoped for, all the things that I've prayed for, all the things that like I've wanted, and now it's like it's happening in real time. And I'm like, "Oh my god, it's happening. It's actually happening. This doesn't happen to nobodies like me." And um so it's very surreal, like, to say the least. And so there are like a couple like little other details, like, that I might be leaving out in that sense, but that essentially that's kind of the story how I landed Dr. Ratio, and it's been a very incredible journey so far.
Is it like, considering his personality, is it hard for you to relate to him?
It is. That's a very good question, actually. Because certain characters, especially regardless of whatever vocation is, whether it be voice acting, stage, or film, or TV, certain characters are more difficult to portray than others. And Dr. Ratio for me was difficult because the way I kind of started out voicing him had drastically kind of been adapted in regards to our first recording session. Because in my mind, he's like who Dr. Ratio is, like, through and through. He's very socially tone deaf. He has no filter. He very much just says what he thinks, and he doesn't spare anybody's feelings in that sense. He has no time for people who he deems beneath him or lesser intelligent. And it actually, in like ignorance, irritates him and it angers him. And so you can kind of like in a very brief description of him, you can say he's an a-hole through and through. And I don't like portraying jerks in that sense, because I can't really relate. I don't let go out of my way to be malicious or mean in that sense. And so it was very difficult. So whenever I would go into a voice session, I would always fall into a pit trap that Philip would always call me out on in recording sessions. Is like, "No, you have to hate this person. No, you have to I need him meaner." And because I would always try and throw in a little bit of charm, trying to be like tongue-in-cheek humor kind of a thing. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, like anyone can be likable, like you can tell someone they're stupid to their face as long as you have a smile, or you do it with humor or something like that. Here it's that doesn't exist. Like Dr. Ratio very much says what he means. If he thinks you're an idiot, like, he'll still tell you to your face you're an idiot. And I'm not used to that as an actor. And so it was very much difficulty going in from ground zero and from day one. That whole experience was just it was a learning experience, but also it was like boot camp, going through like, just understanding like what this character is. And I still sometimes find myself falling into that pit trap where I kind of want to add a little more charm to him, but Philip calls me out, like rightfully so. And so it's but ultimately it's been an incredible experience. And I just feel very blessed and also just very unworthy in that sense.
Well, aside from the one that you mentioned already, do you have other favorite lines for him?
Ooh, well, funny enough, whenever it comes to like, favorite lines, I feel like this, whenever I'm in the recording booth, I think I'm so focused on, trying to, deliver a good performance that sometimes it's difficult to like, take away key moments and key choices, and key lines for that matter. But overall, I think one of my favorite interactions is when Dr. Ratio concludes his and Ron May's campaign storyline, where Dr. Ratio has that flame in a box and he's meeting with Screwlum. So the conversation with him and Screwlum, I think, is one of my standout favorite moments in that sense, where he's basically talking about like why I did this, and so it really kind of reveals Dr. Hero as more of an anti-hero than a villain or even a hero in that sense, where he wants to pry people's dependency on the intelligentsia guild, like the insane genius guild members, like they're in their idol worship of that, where he wants people to stand on their own 2 feet and think for themselves. And but like, does he go out of his way to kind of make that happen? Yeah, but I feel like a lot of good teachers, do that, where they kind of like put their students in kind of sink or swim situations where in order to really excel and come into their own, you have to put them under pressure. And that's one takeaway that I really, really resonated with me. Um, so I can't really pick out like a favorite line, but like that's one of my favorite interactions. But I have to say, one of the coolest, like kind of like popping the collar out moments is when he finally has his final say before he disappears, and leaves Screwlum with the sacred flame. I forget exactly what it is, the curio that he captures, but it's a farce full of trivial concerns. Ultimately, they're just mediocre minds. And so it's a very like cool, popping the collar off like as I walk away kind of moment. And so yeah, I'd say that's probably like one of my favorite takeaways.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask next, was what your favorite interactions are with him and like other characters.
Oh yeah, I'd say definitely Dr. Ratio and Screwlum, and also the beginnings of when Dr. Ratio meets Trailblazer for the first time, and we see him with the plaster face on, and you immediately find out, because what was kind of frustrating about that is I remember recording for that specific scene, and that's when I found myself kind of adding a little more charm to that, because basically Dr. Ratio is telling Trailblazer, like, to his or her face that, have you considered that the relevance to your question has no impact on our current predicament? Basically calling them an idiot to their face, essentially. And I think one of the choices that they could respond with is like, why do you have that plaster head on your face? Because I can't bear to look at idiots. But then again, they wouldn't want to see me. And so that was definitely one of my favorite moments, because it kind of shows like that this guy has no filter, and like he's such a dick, in that sense. And like I've seen a lot of a couple of let's plays of people like going through that, and like their reactions are always the same. Like, wow, this guy's a jerk. I love him. And so yeah, definitely the moments between Dr. Ratio and Trailblazer and Dr. Ratio and Skrullum, because there's that, bitter rivalry, between the two of them, two great minds that think very, very differently. And so I love that dynamic, and I love how it was written, that scene, because it's done really, really well. And it kind of like peels back the curtain of what's really kind of going on. Yes, there's this big, huge, looming threat in the background, but also you have these two titans of intellect kind of clashing heads of one person doing one way and one person doing things another way, and but ultimately their goals are the same. It's for the greater good, but they just because they do things quite drastically differently. It's like when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, it's just like nothing's going to get done unless like we're on the same page. And so it kind of sets up the battleground for later interactions, I feel like. And so that's something that I'm very much looking forward to.
Is there something that you would hope to see for his character?
Hmm. I would like to see. I don't want to, because right now, as I understand Dr. Ratio, I don't want his like character or personality to change, because I think that's what really makes him unique. Where he is very much, because like it'd be one thing if Sherlock from for Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock, he wouldn't be Sherlock if he didn't continue to be that socially inept but beautifully and brokenly an intelligent individual. He wouldn't be Sherlock if he like was fixed and like started caring more about people. Like in some respects he does, but not for the sense like where he's like not even recognizable anymore. What I think I would like to see happen is Dr. Ratio still stay who he is to the core of what he is, but at one point maybe taking a chance on blind faith of someone that he doesn't agree with eye to eye. Like it's like kind of like going with a plan that doesn't make any sense to him. It's just like, no, the probability of this succeeding are astronomically low. Like this, it's stupid, it's folly. Like I can see him easily just kind of like laying out every single scenario of just like failure, 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 failure. We should not be doing this. But he knows that, the person's intentions, are good, but he's just like, all right, if this is going to be an ultimate learning experience, like for you to learn the hard way, I'm going to do that. And then he goes with them, and maybe it's someone makes a bad call, and then he has to make that sacrifice of like maybe it would suck if Dr. Ratio had to make like a very that ultimate sacrifice where he ends up paying the ultimate cost of that. I would hate for him to die, because not only does that mean like I don't get any more work, but I think that would be a very beautiful reflection of something that like the last lesson that he gives to someone, where he's like, you can learn so much from failure, but you have to also factor in what it's going to cost for the price of success. And so he gives maybe that maybe whether it be Trailblazer or maybe even a rival, that he sacrifices himself in that sense, to let them try again. So I think that's something that I would love to see.
Have you had much interaction with the fan base?
Mm, not really. I feel like what's really interesting about this whole setup is because I'm not really a prevalent actor in that sense. Like this is again my breakout role. I'm starting to kind of like now get more and more chatter, like just on my YouTube page. I've had some fans reach out to me through some of my videos that are completely unrelated to Honkai Star Rail, because I haven't released anything in years. But they were like, "Thank you so much." Like, oh, not really thank you, but like, you did such an amazing job with Dr. Ratio, and thank you for your efforts. That's what I was trying to lead up to. And so it's been very positive, but like it's those comments are kind of few and far between. But ultimately, I see on the forums, I see on Honkai's Facebook page and YouTube channel, where and even their Twitter page, it's just been nothing but positive feedback, and if there is any valid criticism or any kind of like criticism in that sense, like I've yet to see it, but ultimately it's been very very positive. I am in the process of making a Twitter handle for myself, and sooner rather than later. But so I think it will probably that's when the floodgates will probably open, and we'll see, we'll see how that comes turns out. But for now, yeah, I think just the only interaction personally, like for lack of a better term, that I've experienced is just through my YouTube channel. But yeah, it's all been just very very positive, and even through the Discord chat that I'm with the other Honkai cast, they've been just nothing but kind and sweet to me, and so it's been a very very wonderful experience so far.
Well, I think one reason, like one thing that helped his character get so popular was the light cone artwork, like where he's in the bath.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I've seen all the memes, in that sense. I uh, I think I have two very good friends that live in California. I actually officiated their wedding, and they're basically like family to me. They live in a completely different town than where I live, about an hour, 2 hours away from where I live. But they were sharing with me a collage of some of those memes that were coming about from the birthplace of Dr. Ratio's bathtub. And they were saying, Jordan, you should next, if you ever get invited to the next anime expo or something like that, you should cosplay as this character. And so I'm like, okay, there are two options that we can go about doing this. Well, first and foremost, I don't look like Dr. Ratio in any way, shape, or form. So if we decide to go through authenticity, we'd have to like every detail like on the nose. And I just happened like, oh wow, you sound really like close like Dr. Ratio, like as I'm going around walking. Or we do it like just completely hokey, completely stupid, completely absurd. I have like a cardboard cutout of like a bathtub, and I just have a really crappy wig on, and so just completely absurd. And I just go around, like in this bathtub and just taking pictures and photos, and then you look distressed. Is something troubling you? Like, oh my gosh, are you Dr. Ratio? Kind of. So like either completely authentic or just completely stupid and absurd. So I think I would actually gravitate more towards the stupid and absurd with that bathtub. So that's at least what I would do. So
Well, is there anything that you want to say to the like community for his character?
um thank you for the warm reception. Thank you for um this like such a warm welcome and such a lot of the love and appreciation and feedback for this character. Again, it's very surreal because sometimes I have to keep on pinching myself to let myself know that this is happening because I see advertisements for our Honkai Star Rail like all the time because I do play the game, just kind of from a casual standpoint. I have no idea what the heck I'm doing in it, but as someone who just kind of loves to see their work, as from an actor standpoint, like it's always great to like you know um like see how much love and care went into this character, and also just kind of like how well it's received. And but yeah, it's still very surreal because I think the last thing that someone posted when Dr. Ratio became available for 1.6, there was a billboard in LA that it has Dr. Ratio like putting up the L, and he's got his book in hand. And just like I like everyone was like, I want that. Like I want my character to be on a billboard. I'm just like, holy cow, my character's on a billboard. This is so crazy. So so thank you for the love and support, from Dr. Ratio to the Honkai community.
Well, my final question is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
Ooh, my legacy, if I ever get around to it, um, depending on like, where my journey takes me, I would love to meet with fans. I would love to, and I think this is like, it's nothing new in that sense. A lot of actors, want to do this. I know how difficult it is to get into the industry, and I'm experiencing it now in real time, and even then, like, it kind of feels like the gears are slowly turning. what my hope is that the characters that I'll voice from here on out in my career, I hope they inspire other people to not only, challenge themselves, but and go after the things that they're good at, but also to let them know it is possible. It's incredibly difficult. You might have to make a couple sacrifices, and you might have to even face some hard truths. But I want you to succeed. I want you to do what not just makes you happy, but do what makes you fulfilled in that sense. And I want to be able to share my hurts, my sorrows, my challenges, the shortcomings, and I want to be able to share that with others and be like, hey, it's achievable. This is possible. And because I feel a lot of people like that love video games, that love anime, that love cartoons, they kind of see they very much are they care about these characters, they care about these franchises like that they're invested in, and you're kind of seeing the magic. It's the same thing with movies and TV. Why a lot of people just they love the art form, and it's such a wonderful place of escape where where it means something to them, and that's something that's very special. And I want people to go after what makes them happy and what makes them again it's not going to be easy, and sometimes maybe it's not meant to be, but I want to be able to leave a legacy behind where it's possible, and you can do it. Just you can put in the hard work, and then it will you know it will eventually come to fruition. So that's hopefully the legacy that I want to leave behind.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Same, Chris. This was wonderful.
Have a good rest of your day then.
Excellent. You too. Take care.